Welcome to the Unvarnished Mind. This is Dalbir.
And this is Diogenes.
Okay, so staying true to the name of our podcast, we're going to have a unvarnished discussion on free will. So this is a topic that I've thought about a long time, and whenever we would go as a PhD student, I knew a bunch of other PhD students in the philosophy department. We go out to the bar, have a few drinks, and discuss with other philosophy members, people in the maths department as well. I would do this. We just discuss free will, sort of shoot the shit, sort of casually discuss this topic. Um, I listened to many podcasts about this, and I have, yeah, just ruminated about this topic many times before. So I have several thoughts on this. And Diogenes has some thoughts on this as well. I've listened to Sam Harris's book, Free Will. I've listened to some other people discuss this, but to be fair, I have not done my due diligence of writing down sort of the arguments and, sort of syllogistic arguments and justifications for what I think and what I believe. So this is just going to be, you know, thinking out loud, so to speak, about our thoughts on free will. And I think this naturally, makes for a good discussion because I think I myself and Diogenes sort of disagree. So we can sort of just push back on our viewpoints here and sort of discuss these ideas. So I want to just say in advance, these are not our, final thoughts. These are just our unvarnished. This is just an unvarnished sort of discussion on the topic of free will.
Yeah, it's possible we'll be thinking aloud and say something foolish or stupid. Um,
Yeah.
it's part of the laughter.
Certainly will say some foolish things, I'm sure, that people will pick apart, but it's it's sometimes nice to have these discussions out loud in order to figure out where our arguments are sort of weak and sort of focus in on that and sort of read up on that topic, rather than just kind of going in full on to a topic. So hopefully that'll be useful or interesting for you guys to listen to as well.
All right, off we go. So, free will is a storied topic in Western philosophy. Um, the discussion of it that I'm familiar with mostly took place around what is called in philosophy the modern period, um, and that starts with the scientific revolution period, basically. So that would be Descartes, Spinoza, um, Francis Bacon during that period, and it goes until about the 19th century, um, during which period we have other movements kind of taking precedence, including German idealism, um, which kind of the first person of that was Kant, and he talked about free will a good amount, although I don't know too well his arguments about it. But he was the first member of what we call German idealism, and that was in the early 19th century. So the modern period, um, yeah, yes, includes an Enlightenment period. Descartes famously talked about free will quite a lot. Spinoza denied the existence of free will, said
Mm.
everything's deterministic. Um, and yeah, so that's a period I'm mostly familiar with, along with sort of late 20th century sort of pop philosophy discussions of it, um, often amongst the new atheists. So actually, I kind of got into philosophy by listening to religious debates between particularly Christopher Hitchens and the religious. And so free will came up in those discussions. And so the discussion of free will was one of the first, along with arguments for the existence of God. That was some of my first exposure to philosophy. Um, and so it's it takes a big it's very relevant in philosophy and religious in in religious thought, free will, particularly among Christianity. So I don't know really its role in Buddhism or Eastern philosophy, Eastern religions, but certainly with Christianity as a huge place. And I was going through that in philosophy of religion class.
Yeah, the Christians famously believe in free will. There has to be free will, right? That's
Yeah. For the most part, you have John Calvin, and he has this notion of predestination.
but they still believe in free will somehow.
Yeah, that's what I thought, and I forget how it goes.
I remember,
Yeah,
I won't mention specific names, but we had a debate with our
yeah.
Christian
Well,
friend or our
you,
math PhD
you
friend
know,
about this,
you
and
sum it up a little
we
bit. But what do we go?
talked.
Because to me it's confusing because John Calvin, the Swiss theologian, famously had this notion of predestination. That is, God has decided in advance who will go to heaven and hell.
So let's before we get ahead of ourselves, clearly you know the history of this discussion of free will, which
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
really know very well. You sound very enthusiastic, by the way, discussing
No,
this.
yeah. Too much. It's fine.
But
No, it's
well,
good.
let's just start by what we both mean by free
Analysts
will. Let's just
talk
start
about
there, before we get
what
into the weeds of,
what do people mean?
um,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So,
So
what do you think free will is?
it's drawn in opposition to determinism, which kind of sounds like John Calvin. So determinism is the view that, well, okay, except there's
No, not
rationalist.
quite.
No,
I
no.
don't
So
think
it's not
is that really the thing?
usually.
No, so there's
No, so the determinists are on one end usually, and then the free will advocates are on the other, who
well,
say,
there's this whole thing about compatibilism. Remember?
yeah. So
The-
I was about to say that. So poles,
Okay.
and the people that say no, the poles aren't opposed. You can make them compatible. They are compatible. You can make both work. So yeah, that's what you have. Like Daniel Dennett is I think yeah
Yeah.
identified as a compatibilist. Um, whereas another member of the new atheist movement, Sam Harris, vehemently denies the existence of free will. He says we have no choice, really agency ourselves um, on our own actions or the world. It's all just kind of a manifestation of physical processes which are determined in advance. There's nothing else really to say. There's
So
no.
let's just first define. You want to start by defining free will? Would you define as free will?
I think
Um,
yeah, it's a notion. I remember listening to a discussion of Sam Harris about it, and he said it's this notion that you could have done otherwise, and you made a choice to do one thing. So like you you're in an ice cream parlor and there's chocolate and there's vanilla. You choose chocolate, but you could have chosen vanilla, but you made the choice to choose chocolate, and
mhm.
and that was like you deciding how like events are going to proceed. There's like a decision made by you, not by processes that preceded you, made by
Yeah.
your person about I'm gonna get chocolate and not vanilla, and I am like deciding this world event, which is me getting ice cream. Okay,
Mm.
that's the choice part. Um, and then the determinists say no, like all of that. First of all, there's like neuroscientists who say, well, I can detect like in the time leading up to before you made that choice, the instant before, like several seconds before, I can already tell what you were going to choose. So you can actually they think this disproves it because you had this moment that you thought you made the choice, but 10 seconds before. They can actually predict what you are going to choose, and I think this kind of shows it's determined, and there's some other agent that is in charge, not you. That's what these people think it proves. Um, and the determinist in general says that it's all just. I mean, it goes to the deist sort of, um, you know, view of the universe, the Newtonian view that it's all a machine, right? It's all machine.
Hmm.
Every aspect of the universe is like a gear, is a gear in the machine. They all come together, and the events that take place are simply consequences of how the gears in the machine work. And so our decisions, according to the determinist like Spinoza, perhaps I'm not intimately familiar with his discussion of free will, but they would say it's just the universe working as it works. It's the same thing as rain falling from the sky. You don't say, the sky chose to um you know say the rain was going to fall from the sky. No, it's like, I mean, of course we know it doesn't have sentience, etc., but we just view it as a physical process. So the determinist, particularly the material determinist, says, well, this is all determined by material processes, like the neuroscientist who attacks the ice cream parlor scenario.
Mm. So yeah, yeah, this is good. So I do like this definition of this is the intuitive definition of we could have done otherwise. I think that is really the key
Right.
point. Um, I think some people make these stupid claims like, "Oh no, you couldn't have done otherwise, or you couldn't have jumped out the window and not fallen." Well, of course we couldn't have done anything otherwise, but we could have done some things otherwise, right? If you go to the ice cream parlor, they say we have chocolate and vanilla. You can't choose strawberry ice cream because he doesn't have strawberry ice cream. So within the laws of physics as they allow, if you had certain choices, you could have done otherwise. That's what we mean by we could have done otherwise. Uh, and we can tease this apart further, and this is where I think Sam Harris teases it apart further and says if you tease it apart, if you think about this more deeply, this is just a nonsensical notion. And I disagree, but let's just use that intuitive definition for now. Um, Here's where I think determinism throws a wrench in free will. So I'm not a compatibilist. I think compatibilism is nonsensical, really. Um,
Okay.
so
So you don't think a notion of free will as
it's
kind of
compatible with
compatible with
determinism.
the idea that everything is determined in advance? Because
Yeah, yeah.
there's a sort of semantic discussion that people, a compatibilist, like I think Daniel Dennett would say.
So let me give an example. Let me actually,
Maybe
sorry, let me
not Daniel
interject.
Dennett.
I'll actually talk about. So there was a guy.
Yeah.
Um, I think you remember him. The other English guy in the Foster department. He. I was talking to him about free will. He actually said this. Um, he also talked about this notion of agency, where this is where the compatibilists talk about. So what he says, okay, let's say you have choices A, B, and C, right? But it's already predetermined that you have the illusion of choice, basically. You have A, B, and C as the potential illusion of choice, but you can actually only choose B, right? And in each instance, you can only choose, there's only one choice available to you. But if your preferences are for the only available choice, then he defines that as being you having agency. So I think this compatibleness notion of free will is what is agency in this case. So let's say, for example, right, like,
Oh, wait, can you repeat that? Yeah.
yeah, so let's say you're a puppet, right? You're a conscious puppet, and there's a puppeteer that can actually will control every action that you take, right? And you're given, let's say, three choices of ice cream. Let's say you wanted strawberry ice cream, right? Not chocolate or vanilla. And but the puppeteer in advance said, okay, he can only pick the strawberry ice cream. So even if you try to reach for the vanilla ice cream, your hand will reach for the strawberry ice cream and take that. So no matter what you do, he says, whatever you want, he'll only give you the strawberry ice cream, right? But if your preferences are that actually I do want strawberry ice cream, so you think you have these three choices, and then you reach for the strawberry ice cream, and the puppeteer has already determined in advance, hey, I'm going to only give you the strawberry ice cream. So if your choice aligns with what is determined, like your preference is aligned with what is already determined, then that's called having agency,
It's called
not free will, because you don't have, it's not free. You don't have the free decision. You have a preference, and your preference is being met by what's already determined, but you actually couldn't have chose otherwise. That's just a small distinction, a semantic distinction that is useful to make here. I think you can be a compatibilist and believe in agency, where your preferences align with what is already determined, but I don't think you can be um, someone who believes in free will and also a determinist. So just very briefly, right, the determinist notion. So this is with the triumph of Newtonian physics, where Newton showed definitively through coming up with his basic laws of motion, a lot of the observation, they were able to predict the motions of the planets, right? The trajectories of objects, all these things. And these were all the laws that he wrote down were deterministic laws. So it was people believe that if so basically what so a lot of these I'm getting into maths here, but Newton's laws are differential equations that show how objects change, their positions change over time, essentially, right? So you have these Newtonian laws that talk about this, and you have the law of universal gravitation that shows what kind of forces act on different bodies. So essentially, you can think of the universe as these objects with certain laws dictating how these objects will interact with one another. And what you have are a set of initial conditions. So when the universe started, you have a set of initial conditions. So if you know, so, like, if you know the state of the universe at any previous time point, you know the entire state of the universe at any previous time point. If Newton's laws were the totality of what would occur, then the future states are fully determined. They cannot be any other option. So if I have a like, for example, you're on Earth, right? The Earth applies a certain force on an object, right? Let's say you have a ball, right? And the Earth exerts a force on the ball, and the ball exerts a force on the Earth, and this is determined already based on the mass of the ball and the Earth. If you apply a certain force to it, there's only one possible trajectory this ball can take on. There's only one, this ball can either will go up for a certain amount of time and come back down. The time in which the ball comes back down is determined by the force you apply to the ball. So it's fully determined. So the point is the whole universe is just all of these objects with predetermined laws. So if you know the initial conditions or just the prior conditions, all future states are fully determined. So that was the idea of determinism. And this is why many people, if you believe that the totality of the laws of the universe were fully deterministic, then the universe was deterministic, and the concept and notion of free will is incoherent. We just don't, or not incoherent, but just it's not possible in our universe because we don't have free choice. You couldn't have chosen otherwise. The physical laws dictate what you will choose, so it's all an illusion. So that's why I think that determinism is not compatible with free will because you couldn't have done otherwise. So I would say that just closes that case. If your preferences happen to align with what will happen, then you're lucky, but you're not free. You don't have the free will. You just have agency, right? You're just lucky that they align. So that's basically my position there on determinism and free will.
Okay, so there's agency and free will. So agency is whether or not you can do something about it.
No, agency is whether your preferences align with your choices. I mean, that's how he defined it. I'm not sure this is like
Wait, who
this is how
again?
I remember him defining it.
Wait, who again? Yeah, who defined it again?
Johnny.
Johnny. Oh, Johnny. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. Friend. Mostly your friend.
You met him, yeah,
Hmm. It's trying to because you know my view is that it's all kind of bogus concept.
yeah. All right, explain yourself. Yeah, tell me why it's a bogus concept.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm just trying to think of how it like interacts with your view. Perhaps you can help us do that. Um, Anyhow,
I was, yeah, yeah. Go ahead. If you can
yeah,
explain to me, tell me
but
why it's a bogus
like attack.
concept, I can sort of push back. It's more. I think it's better that way.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. I want you to attack my view with your view. So and we went over this in metaphysics class at uni. That was like the probably the most free will discussion I had at uni and my philosophy program. Um, no, philosophy religion too. But anyhow, um, we went over the view that I'm sympathetic to, which is that free will is kind of an incoherent concept. Doesn't really make much sense either way. So basically, the way it goes is that either it's all determined, it's deterministic, the universe is deterministic. Okay, first of all, I should say metaphysics. Why are we talking about this in metaphysics? In metaphysics, well, because metaphysics is the discussion of what is reality. So anyhow, so
Yeah.
whether or not we have free will fits within that. What we talked about is how basically either way you go, either it's determined or it's indeterminate, and either way doesn't really sound like there's that much agency involved that we associate with the concept of free will.
Mhm.
Um, because we have this agency, I chose this, etc. And so, but either way, whether or not the events are determined or indeterminate, it doesn't really seem like it involves that either. Basically, what I put it is either the deterministic processes are in charge or the indeterministic processes are in charge. And neither of them strike me as particularly constitutive of free will.
Yeah, yeah. I think that this is what. Yeah.
It's like this grand decision of like, oh, I'm making the choice to take the chocolate. It's like either it's kind of a randomness, which is the indeterminism. That I mean, I think this is a big premise to swallow. Is that this indeterminism doesn't really constitute free will very much. It's kind of easier to make the case that the determinism doesn't. Um, basically, you just have to argue against the compatibilists. But it's the alternative is sort of it's not determined. It's indeterministic, and to it to me that just sounds more like the chaos is in charge. That's what's in charge. The randomness is in charge. You know,
Mm.
it's not like this notion of me that like it's like I don't know where my choice came from. I don't know. I just made it. I didn't choose my choice. That's the thing. I didn't like and it's a difficult like in my life. It's very difficult to make decisions. Personally, I find a lot of decisions difficult to make, and it slows me down often.
Mm.
But eventually, I'm weighing the pros and the cons, and what should I do? What should I go? I'm planning a trip right now. Okay, I have to make choices about where I'm gonna go. Okay, I'm gonna go across Germany. But which city am I gonna go to? Okay, but I'm gonna have to choose at one point, and maybe it's determined, but maybe it's not determined, and I'm just gonna kind of end up, as I often do, just saying, okay, you know what? I'm gonna stop weighing pros and cons. I'm just gonna choose one, and you know, it it doesn't really come from anywhere. You choose an alternative. Um,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
anyhow, I think I've explained it well enough, hopefully. Um, but a lot of my own decisions really seem to have this character, so-called decisions, where
yeah.
I just make a choice out of nowhere. Going back to perhaps we mentioned this conversation before this video. I liked it by the popular YouTube um, psychologist Ryan
Orion Terror.
Ryan. What's
Ryan O'Terra.
make it into
Ryan O'Terraban.
yeah yeah make it into an Irish yeah yeah no so no guy just had a good short clip saying how rationality itself won't make a decision for you. Rationality and reason, perhaps he said. I think he said rationality, but perhaps he said reason. It helps you. It can give you. It weighs out pros and cons, and that's all it does. It doesn't actually make the decision for you. that is not like the work of reason or rationality, according to him, and it's like a plausible account of um, the way things are. You weigh the pros and cons, and then there's this magic sort of choice thing, that floats in there that we don't even account for. But whether or not it's determined or indeterminate, it doesn't seem to me like it's sort of agent act.
Yeah, yeah. So okay. So
Why
let me
back?
give you an yeah.
Tell me why I'm wrong.
Yes, I will tell you exactly where you're wrong. I think this comes under I think the way I would this I've heard this argument by Sam Harris, and actually it's something that I thought about before. I remember watching a video on Big Think, I think, by this guy, physicist Michio Kaku, where he said, there's a discussion on free will, but quantum mechanics show that the universe is not deterministic, and so we do have free will. And I was like, oh yeah, great. That's what I thought. It's what it feels like. Case closed. And then I thought about this deeper, and then
What what did he say? What did he say in the video? What proved that we have free will according to him in the video?
yeah,
I'm
so he basically said this is again, I watched this video over a decade ago, I think. So he just said that quantum mechanics shows that the universe is not deterministic,
not yeah.
right?
It's indeterminism.
Yeah.
Often the quantum mechanic shit comes in. Whatever. I don't know physics well, but the point is, it's to me, it's these indeterministic quantum processes that are in charge, not like this free will thing. It's clearly that.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah, so let me so yeah, so this is the thing. So that's what he said. And I was like, okay, so that proves it. Then I thought, oh, then I kind of went back to I had the sort of doubts and that eventually Sam Harris also talked about with, you know, here's a good analogy. I was thinking about this when you were talking. Um, so here's a sort of deterministic worldview, right? Here's a very simple analogy, right? Let's say you're playing a game and you have to choose a you have to choose a number between you have to choose any number, right? Any integer. At the next time, let's say you every like 1 minute you have to choose a number, right? Some integer. And that number is determined in the deterministic universe, that number is determined by the number you had chosen prior multiplied by 5, for example. Right? So let's say you initially chose a number 3, the next minute the number you will choose will be 15. And then the rule is after that you divide by 4. Or like there's some rule, there's a deterministic rule set. Or let's just say it's very simple, make the very simple example. You take the number and then you multiply by 5. That's the next number that you'll choose. You think you can choose any integer, but the number you'll choose in the future time step is just based on the number you chose prior, right? And then in the deterministic universe, right, there is no free will because the number you will choose will just be whatever number you chose prior multiplied by 5. We agreed that there's no free will. And then now we say, hey, look, actually the universe is not deterministic. And what Sam Harris and what I think what you're arguing is, okay, what's going on now is that now you say, okay, you multiply by 5, but then you then add, you roll a dice and you add whatever the dice roll was. But you don't control what the roll of the dice is. So in what sense do you have free will? Because the number you now choose will be the number you chose prior times 5 plus roll a dice and add that number to it. Where is the free will? That's really what your argument boils down to. Am I correct? So that's the question, right? So I think there's a bit of sleight of hand being played here. So we're all composed, and again, this is where I get a bit woo-woo here. And I think the case I will make is that there is a potential for free will. I cannot prove using the current laws of physics and that sort of thing to prove that we have free will. But I can say that it opens a possibility for it. And the reason is because if you're somewhat a materialist, the decisions that you make are a byproduct of the particles that you're composed of, right? And these sort of random processes are things that occur in you. And in a sense, it is you who chose those values. So quantum mechanics, essentially what it says, right? So um, there's this like so these classical laws are basically sort of what happens in this sort of asymptotic case. You can look at like the Ehrenfest theorem and these sort of things. It shows that these quantum mechanical random laws become sort of deterministic in the sort of um, when you have many particles, essentially. So basically, in quantum mechanics, again, I'm a bit rusty. I took a course on this. I took a couple courses on this as in uni. So essentially, you have what's a wave function, right, for a particle. This is like this is a time independent case. You have a wave function of a particle, and its complex conjugate creates what's called a probability distribution for future states of this particle. So a probability distribution is just it's a function that tells you all possible future outcomes for this um, random variable. So like very simply, right? Let's do a very simple example, right? Let's say your object can you have a coin, right? And it's a quantum mechanical coin. It can either be heads or tails, right? This probability distribution just tells you what is the probability it'll be heads, what is the probability it'll be tails. So before you flip it, the very simple example, it's actually the electron, right? The electron will have a spin, what's called a spin, can be spin up or spin down, right? This is the most simple example to consider. Um, and the spin is not determined until you measure the spin. So the probability distribution will tell you what is the probability that you will measure this particle as being spin up versus spin down. And these probabilities will be influenced by will have some influence based on if it's sort of entangled with some other particle or there's some other particle that it's entangled with or interacting with. That will affect its probabilities. But at the end of the day, the if it's perfectly entangled with some other particle, then it could be perfectly determined by its measurement. But essentially, the point is, before measurement, you cannot determine what the state of this particle will be, whether it'll be spin up or spin down. So if you take the perspective of, here's my sort of, I guess you can call it my perspective, my notion is that this particle chooses, when you measure it, it chooses its state of being spin up or spin down. So you can say that particle has free will because, right? So if you, here's another way to think about it. So if you say, right, the the future state is sort of caused by previous outcomes. So you apply force to an object, you the cause is the force you apply, the effect is what is the outcome, right? So in a non-deterministic universe, right, the future states are not cannot be completely determined by previous causes. So the only thing that can cause it is itself. So it's sort of a self-caused determination, and that is its free will. So the particle sort of exerts free will by choosing its state up or down. And the point is, no other measurement can tell you what its future outcome is. So in that sense, this particle exerts free will in choosing its future state. So that is free will. It
Why
is
did it?
you are like it's yeah, so go ahead.
How do we? How did we establish that it chose its own spin?
Then what else shows it? If you think so if you say that every future outcome is caused by some other thing, so this is I guess a sort of an axiom, right? So for example, why did this object move is because I pushed it. I applied a certain force to it. Its future state was caused by the force that was applied to it, right? So then now this particle there's some you determine its state it gets chosen spin up or spin down, right? But it was not caused by anything else.
Yeah, so
It
it's
was
indeterminate.
so it's sort of it's self-caused. That would be
Okay,
my that is the definition of free will. It's a self-determination. You choose.
self-determination.
Yeah, it's you choose like the vanilla or the chocolate. It's not something else chose. So in the case where, for example, right, let's say the
Okay.
ice cream. Let me go back to the example I gave you, right? So the number you choose at the next time step is the number you chose prior multiplied by five, right? Correct? Do you agree?
Uh,
We talked about this example, right? Let's say
what? So,
so
so
so at every like so we're playing this game, right? This is the your universe is where you the number you every 1 minute you have to choose a number,
yeah,
right? And that number in the deterministic universe, I say the number that you choose is that whatever you chose at the previous time step times five, right? So
yeah,
you have an illusion that you can choose any number, but actually it's determined because you multiply it's whatever you chose prior multiplied by five. So if you know what number you chose at any time prior, you can determine what number you'll choose any time in the future. Correct? That's the deterministic universe. So now let's say you go to your ice cream stand, right? And you have to choose between vanilla and chocolate, right? In this deterministic universe, say the way this works is you it's whatever so if that number you multiply by five when you that number is even, then it's you choose vanilla. If it's odd, you choose chocolate, right? So that will determine whether you choose vanilla or chocolate. So in this example with the free will, so now with the randomness, right? We're saying there's some dice, there's you roll a dice and you add that to the number you multiply by five previously, and that's the number you divide, you figure out whether it's odd or even. That determines what ice cream you choose. But the point is, the reason why we don't consider it as having free will is because both of these things were external to us. In this causal loop, right? Have I lost you here? Maybe I'm just um
it just doesn't. Examples just uh, create you kind of create an equation for like describing what my future choice is going to be. Okay, it's determined, yes. Okay, but what I just fail to understand is like why we call it's a debate about semantics. Why do we call this free choice? Like the self determination of the quantum particle or choosing its spin. It quote chooses its spin. It's clearly analogical thinking. You know, our notions of choice have like higher faculties involved. You know, that's yeah.
Yeah, okay. This is a kind of hypothesis here. Like I'm giving a plausible. So here's the thing. Okay, look.
You know,
Here
it's
is the point. Okay, look. Here's the point. So I
quantum.
would just my
Uh,
definition of
what?
free will is some object, right? I'm not. It doesn't have to do with consciousness or anything. It's just an object will have exerts free will if its future state cannot entirely be cannot be entirely determined by its prior state. It sort of chooses its future state, right? So it's not, at least its future state cannot be
It
fully externally caused. That's basically what I would say.
I'm still a bit confused. So can you elaborate further?
Okay. Okay. So okay, consider this. Okay, let's go back to the ice cream stand, right? You walk into the ice cream shop. Okay. You walk to the ice cream shop and there are a certain number of people behind you in line. Right. So here's the example. Let's consider three cases where I will consider um there being I'll explain the case where option one, your choice, this is some ice cream stand. It only has two flavors, vanilla and chocolate, to make this very simple. Right. I will explain the case where your choice is determined. I'll explain the choice case where your choice is undetermined or indetermined. It's it's indeterministic, and then I'll describe the third choice where it's free. Okay,
Okay. All right. Yeah. Yeah.
so it
Yeah.
sort of distinguishes three. So
Yeah.
my point with Sam Harris is that Sam Harris is muddling up the free choice and the indeterminate choice. He's not distinguishing between these two cases. Okay, so option A, the deterministic case, how your flavor of ice cream is chosen. You walk into line, counting yourself, right? You plus whatever number of people there are behind you, there is an integer number of people there, right? So you count behind you as five other people behind you, you're one person, then the ice cream flavor that you choose is you take that, if that number is even, you choose chocolate or you choose vanilla. If it's odd, you choose chocolate. Okay? That is a deterministic choice. Agreed?
Yeah,
Okay. So
yeah.
here's option two, where it's a non-deterministic choice. You go there, you do the same thing. You count five people behind you, you yourself, that's six. So if it was deterministic, you end there, you choose vanilla. But no, you don't do that. You then roll a six-sided dice. You get that number, it's a three. Three plus six is nine. You choose chocolate because nine is odd, right? That is an indeterministic choice. So it's also not free. It was determined the die. So in this case, what caused in case one, what caused the flavor ice cream you chose? That was determined by the number of people in line behind you. That was not caused by you, so it's not free. Case two, it was caused by whatever the die showed up as, and then the number of people in line behind you. That's also not free. Option three, okay, you go to the line, you count the number of people behind you, right? And then you include yourself, and then instead of adding, you you pick a number between one and six to add to it, and then that's your flavor ice cream. So you want chocolate, you add one. You don't want chocolate, you add two or four or six, and then you get vanilla. So basically, those are the three ways of
Uh, well, you add a number and that makes it
basically the number at the end of the day determines whether you choose chocolate or vanilla.
right. Yeah,
Right.
so yeah, auto, even, chocolate,
Or,
vanilla, and then
mhm.
and so you're saying the fact that you're adding,
Yeah, you add a number, right? So in the second case, you roll the dice and you added that to it.
yeah, you added that to make it auto even, and then in the
That
last scenario,
you don't roll a die. You don't roll a dice.
you come up with a number,
You come up
uh,
with a number. You choose a number, and then
that's free.
that's free, I would say, right?
Uh,
And here's the point is no other external thing chose in order for free will to be a coherent concept, right? So in this case, in one case, it was determined by sort of other universal laws. In the second case, it was determined by something that was already deterministic, right? Plus something you couldn't predict beforehand. In the third case, it was no external person can predict what number you'll add, but you can predict. You chose it. Like it's basically the causal factor is based on you. So essentially, that's what I consider as free will. Is this? It's not fully determined. The choice that's being made, the outcome that ends up occurring, is not fully determined by the things external to it. That is when you have free will. So that's what I call free will. So essentially, why I would say we have free will is because we ourselves are composed of particles that have free choice in determining its quantum states, and those play a role in making our choices. Those particles belong to us. It's not belonging to something external. Our brain, which makes choices, is composed of particles themselves, and they make these free choices.
it still seems like the particles are just rolling dice. They're just rolling die.
But it's you're choosing the outcomes.
But I'm choosing the outcomes
Yeah.
because of the quantum particles and how they're not determined.
Hmm.
I mean, it's just, yeah,
All right. Case closed. Now you
case,
agree. Now you understand.
yeah. No, I understand.
Hopefully that cleared that up for
We'll
everyone.
talk about it
Case
now.
closed.
Talk about
We'll
no.
see you
So
next time.
it's no. I mean, semantically,
I've relinquished you from your ignorance, right?
yeah. Okay, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I mean that's how Descartes talks. I started reading Meditations, Meditation Métaphysique, right?
Yeah.
And he's very certain of himself.
Yeah.
Uh, but anyhow, um, he's using reason to absolutely get to like the truth. He thinks he can like find knowledge. that way. Free will, likewise. Anyhow, yeah, no. To me, it doesn't. I don't think calling it choice really like adds much. To me, the second and third still seem too similar. I don't really distinguish that much. Yeah, yeah. I guess you could say the dice is deciding in the second one.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the dice is deciding, and the third
you're,
one you're deciding.
yeah, you're deciding. Yeah. But both ways, like it sounds weird to say that the dice is deciding. Okay, it doesn't have like agency over like and the same thing. Like a number comes out of my head, you know, but like it just comes out of my head. But like it's in terms of like that the way it came into my head, the number that decides whether you go chocolate or vanilla. The way that it came into my head is either deterministic or indeterminate. It's either determined or indeterminate. Falls in the first or the second
I think
category.
you defining these terms like you're defining your terms in such a way that you're making free will incoherent. That's the problem. So I think this is the problem, which I really hate Sam Harris's argument about free will too. Whatever, like, there's his the way he conceptualizes things is in a way that no matter what you say or no matter what you do, there is no way in which free will exists. So he's just sort of a tautological argument. Like nothing you can. There's no evidence. There's no argument. There's no theoretical universe in which free will is coherent. So it's just sort of a all of his entire book is just basically vacuous. He could just say free will. I don't believe in free will. I don't think it's a coherent concept. Um, I can never, even in a hypothetical universe, can't make it a coherent concept, so it doesn't exist. He could write two sentences and finish his book. His book is basically pointless. Um,
Yeah. I might be inclined to do that myself.
so
Yeah.
then they don't we don't have there's no debate to be had here. I think if
No,
you want to
there's a debate.
discuss free will,
There's a debate about pragmatics. There's a debate about pragmatics. How ought we to use language? Okay, and a lot of philosophy, like, is this is very important in philosophy. Okay,
yeah.
um, so no, it's not to simply be dusted aside. Semantic debates are very important.
Yes,
So,
no, if you want to have a discussion about free will,
uh,
like
ju-
yeah.
just let me finish. So like, I could go with I think in terms of that aspect, I think there are ways in which it's advantageous for us to talk as if we do have free will.
No,
So,
but
so
you said you don't believe in like you think it's an incoherent like here's my point, right? So if we want to have a discussion about free will,
I can
we
unpack the
need
way we
to
use it in language and the way it has a role, like a practical role in our society. And so I can outline that. Maybe I'm a sort of compatibilist, perhaps. I had some sympathy for Daniel Dennett's view, where it's sort of a minimum amount of like reasoning ability, and if you have that, then he says you have free will. But if you don't, like if you're completely nuts and you might be inclined to like start randomly hurting people, then we say we take away that guy's free will. We say he doesn't have free will. His crazy mind's in charge. So like that is the sort of sense in which like in terms of these like functional ways, I think the concept's very useful. We can unpack that usefully. Um, yeah, it's just when you zoom in on it and like a metaphysical discussion, that's where I just get confused about it, I suppose, or it just doesn't make very much sense to me. It's just it just seems like no matter what, it comes out of nowhere. I guess yeah, I guess it's a choice you could say, but
okay. So
I get
here's the point. Look,
maybe that's
here's
fine. That's fine with you that it comes from kind of nowhere, I guess.
in order for something to be free, it has
Yeah.
to sort of like here's the point. Here's my qualms.
Okay.
Here's where I very much disagree, vehemently disagree with Sam Harris,
Okay.
is you want to have a discussion about this concept free will, right? If you want to have a discussion about it, if you don't believe it's possible in this universe, fine. Define a hypothetical universe in which there is something that has free will, and then ask whether this can be mapped onto our universe, and then say and and discuss whether it's possible in our universe or not. Have a discussion about that. But you say it's incoherent. Like there is a notion that we have. Like I get unless you're saying that the notion itself is completely incoherent. There's no way to, like here's the way I would define it. Like in the hypothetical universe, right? Like let's just say that all um all future states are determined by there's some rule like going back to this example of yeah, I have to sit down and think about like a very precise way. I can define a very simple hypothetical universe with this kind of discrete time steps and the states that these objects take on, for example, are either determined by its its previous state and its interaction with other objects in that universe. So, for example, let's say you have two objects, A and B, in this hypothetical universe, right? Um, and the states are determined by some integer, right? So you start with an initial number. Let's consider a deterministic universe. I'm just making this up on the spot now. Um, so you give each of these guys a particular value, right? You give A particular value, 2, B a particular value, 3, right? So the future state of A is you do A, so at time 0, the value is 2. For B, it's 3, right? At time 1, you take the value at the previous time step. So for A, you just multiply by 2. For B, you multiply by 3. Right? That is a deterministic universe. Okay? Does that make sense? So you have a deterministic universe with this. So, or you have another, if you have some sort of interaction, you say you multiply its A's previous state by 2 and then add B's previous time state. That will determine A's future state, right? And then in this sort of non-deterministic universe, you then non-deterministically create a number and add that to A's previous state. So um, at time 1, previously you just multiply A's state by the number 2. So for example, in the deterministic universe, it's 2, 4, 8, 16. So just being multiplied by 2. In this case, you add some number between -1 and 1, some integer, right? That's randomly created. Then you have an indeterministic case. So this is some external number that's just generated that will determine A's future state. But now let's say in this case, A sort of chooses that value. Then that's A is exerting some level of free will is what I would say. So it's the question is what causes? It's a question of cause and effect. And the question is this indetermined value caused by something external, or is it caused by the agent itself? So if A produces some value rather than B producing some value or some other external thing producing some value, the universe producing some value, then A has some um, causal role in its future state. Then it is in some sense free. It's not completely free. Like I said, you can't jump out the window and expect to float, but you can decide whether or not you want to jump out the window, or you can decide if you jump out the window, how far you land from the windowsill, right? Whether you land 10 feet away, 2 feet away. That is in some measure of some degree in your control. So you have some measure of control in your future states, and you're basically the point is you're causally influencing your own future states to some degree, not completely, but to some degree. That's how we should define free will, where it's a coherent concept, and then we can discuss whether this thing exists or not in our universe. If you just say, oh, you know what, whatever evidence you choose, I don't know, it's indeterminate or determined, it's basically a stupid, pointless discussion to be had because you basically defined your words in such a way that no matter what you say, this concept you care about does not exist. So there's no point in having the discussion in the first place. You have to make a semantic concept that is actually theoretically possible to discuss and then ask whether it exists in our universe or not. Or else it's a very pointless discussion. And I think that's a mistake that Sam Harris makes, and it's a very stupid thing that he does.
Um, perhaps we can continue this. Um, I was just gonna say I don't quite see, just don't quite see why like what you're doing is that much different. You're still setting your own terms. I guess you say if it's at the causal nexus, like whatever the agent is, if it's at the causal nexus of it, we can't we can't trace back to the cause before the agent. Then yeah, the agent made a choice, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, and then we can call that a choice. Yeah.
So yeah, one way you can sort of
To
counter
me,
it is you can say it's an uncaused event.
it
This
just
is
seems like, well, it also just seems like you're slapping a name on it a little bit. Just saying, okay, now we have now we have this free will thing. It's like whatever the agent, if the agent has agency, that okay, that's the free will, I suppose. Um, yeah, so I suppose you want to resist turning into this dichotomy of determinism versus indeterminism. It seems to be important to you because if you're doing that, you're defining the debate in terms of like a dichotomy that excludes free will, right? And then
yeah,
that's kind of like unfair to the free will, I guess.
yeah. So I'm just saying, look, when you so basically the point is so I think this has we would have another discussion about what probability, how we define it, and how it's sort of it's a difficult concept to define. But I think, yeah, my position is basically that because of the laws of quantum mechanics as we understand it, as it presently stands, it allows for an it again, I'm not saying I know that we have free will. I'm just saying it allows for a conception or interpretation of what the events that are occurring of the indeterminate of the basically there's an interpretation of the indeterminism that allows for free will. So we can if we basically say, right, so if we say all future states of some particle is determined by its past states and the states of other particles, and itself, right? So basically, so here's the point. So let's say this, going back to the electron spin up or spin down, right? You can influence the probabilities that it'll land spin up or spin down. So if it's interacting with other particles, the probability to land spin up versus spin down can be influenced, but it cannot be purely determined by these external circumstances. So you're saying that it's you can influence it heavily, but so these external factors are causally affecting what will occur in the future. But that final outcome to some that final state at the end of the day will be determined. Is basically the particle at the end of the day decides, sort of chooses up or down. And I think, and again, this is my woo-woo sort of hypothesis is what's going on in our brains is that we have all of these particles which are what's called entangled, so they're correlated with one another, and somehow they form consciousness and this sort of thing. But these these particles are all sort of entangled interact with consciousness for you to sort of choose an indeterminate state of up or down. And like, for example, if you go to a restaurant, right, you might have a preference for a certain the phenomenological experience of you choosing, right, is that so you go to a restaurant, you like a certain food, like let's just you go to an ice cream shop, you like a particular flavor, right? So, but perhaps your preference is sort of influenced by what you ate previously. If you ate ice cream, if you favorite flavor of ice cream is vanilla ice cream we've eaten vanilla ice cream the past 6 days, you can still choose to choose vanilla ice cream, but perhaps because of that, you feel a tendency to maybe want chocolate ice cream more. But then there's other factors that influence. But at the end of the day, all these things influence your future choice. But at the end of the day, that choice is yours. It's not completely determined by external factors. It's determined by these quantum states in your brain to finally choose what you end up choosing. And you can say, hey, look, if someone eats vanilla ice cream 100 days in a row, he's very likely to not choose vanilla ice cream at some point because he will not want to eat the same thing over and over again. But you cannot say with certainty what he will choose. And that's basically what the free will is basically my position. So it opens the possibility for that. The point
But
is, yeah, there is you can't just
does all
say just because it's indeterminate it's not,
boils down to the quantum states, right?
yeah. And the fact that quantum states, like those particles in this quantum states compose you. They're in your brain, right?
Uh,
You would consider the decisions made by your brain your choice, right? And the point is you have to give you're somewhat causally in control. You have some agency in the future decisions that you make because the choices you make are not just fully external to you. The reason why I gave this example, the line, the rolling the dice, is because it's sort of ice cream you chose seems to be external to you, right? The number of people behind you is not in your control. The roll of the dice is not in your control. But if something internal to you is in your control that you chose that for which you have some control over, then you can you have some agency in the choice that's being made. So that's basically my point. So if all the indeterminacy and all the determinacy was not in your control, then yes, you don't have free will. But if some of it is in your control, you have some free will. That's the whole point that I'm making. At least you can allow for there to be free will. That's the point. I don't know if you have free will because maybe you can say these quantum states like it's not really accessible to your consciousness or something, and that's something that you can scientifically do some sort of experiment to falsify it or
me now,
not.
to me now, the quantum states are like in charge. They're like making your choices for
The
you.
quantum states, the point, I think like
And then
again,
these
this is to
tiny
be
little things
determined. This is again to be determined, but I
appear
would
to
say
me to call that
the quantum
like
states determine are part of your conscious, create the consciousness that you experience. The
yeah,
quantum
yeah,
states
on
are
the
part
bottom.
of you, are what you act like. That indeterminacy and you choosing is you sort of taking the fact that you have this freedom, right? So if the future state, spin up, spin down, was determined, you don't have a freedom. But now you have this option, like the future state is not determined by anything prior. It's determined by something internal to you. You're basically in control of your quantum state, and you're choosing that state, is what I'm saying.
To me, okay. I think this is the point where we say we agree to disagree. But to me, you're a host to indeterministic processes. You are a host to a bunch of indeterministic processes, that are undetermined, and the processes are in yourself and they're not outside. And
And
I guess
indeterminacy is what gives you the free will. The point is whether it's not about
yeah,
indeterminacy.
yeah, yeah. Fine, fine, fine.
It's
That's what we
about
both believe.
control. It's about the control. You're saying you're not in control. That means you're making an empirical statement. I'm saying that you might have control. I'm not saying you have control. You don't have control. But the point is, you cannot rule out that that control is not controlled by that. You're saying that it's just the particle that controls it. That's not part of you. You're just saying
Yeah, yeah.
whatever the indeterminacy is. If you're someone who claims definitively that you don't have free will, you are saying that the control does not belong to you.
Mm.
I am saying that these particles compose what I call you.
Yeah, yeah.
You are these the particles that compose you are you to some degree. If you're some level of physicalist, it is these particles, not the particles on this desk, not the particles here that determine the things, the actions that you take. So there are particles in you that will determine your future state, and if the question is about control, that is what determines free will. If all the indeterminacy is not in your control, then you do not have free will.
Okay,
If
so
they are in your control, it's a question of control. You need the indeterminacy. If it's determined, you don't have free will because there's no choice. You need
control,
the
control,
indeterminacy is in your control. That is the point.
the control is where the indeterministic process takes place. Okay. And you say you label it control if the process takes place in my body and nowhere outside of it. And then we label that control, and then we label it free will. I don't think it's completely unreasonable. I think, I think you made a good argument for it, a good case for it. That, definitely did make me, yeah, yeah, sort of reconsider. I
It's
think,
about the locus of control. Yeah, that is the point I'm making. And I'm not saying that we have. Like, I think the point is, this leaves open that there is a semantic distinction here, and then now we can do the experiment to see whether our consciousness can control these things. That leaves open the possible. I'm not making a definitive case that yes, we have free will. I'm just saying that we can now define it in a reasonable way that we can now answer the question of whether we have free will or not. Versus what Sam Harris is doing, he's just sort of doing this very reductionist sort of thinking that just doesn't allow for this concept to exist at all. And I think what he's doing is just actually just totally completely wrong. That's my take. It's about control.
okay,
Yeah.
all right, yeah, that's a good argument. So I'll go into that. It's
All
good.
right. Yeah.
So with that, we will leave the discussion as is. A bit of back and forth.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. I'm
Somewhat
sure a
original.
physicist will pry apart my notions of quantum mechanics and stuff. But anyways,
It's still interesting. So
yeah.
well argued. Anyhow, thank you for tuning in and
Cheers.
stay tuned for our next episode. Cheers.
Yeah. Cheers.